systematic review of the success rates of culturally informed interventions amongst Native Americans and Alaskan Natives. I am going to be looking at Native American and Alaskan Native populations as we are hardest hit by type 2 diabetes. There is a lot of work that's being done to try and help these communities combat diabetes with prevention measures and with management of type 2 diabetes. Some of these are culturally based. And what I really want to know is there a clinical success of these culturally based initiatives and interventions? Before I move on, I'm going to give a little background. So there is, in the literature, there are concerns of genetic causes of diabetes. There is ecological or environmental causes of diabetes, and then there's things like historical trauma. The genetic component is, there's this theory, and I don't know how well it holds up today, but there's a theory that indigenous peoples have a thrifty gene that was supposedly good for getting people through periods of not having food, and then periods of having lots of food, which would be totally advantageous to a group that hunters and gatherers, right? But totally not appropriate when you have a modern diet where McDonald's is five miles down the road and you have access to it, like, you know, almost 24/7. Talking about environmental, we can think about things like food swamps. What's your availability of cheap, healthy foods versus junk foods? And then we talk about historical trauma. And we look at things like, we go back to talking about before World War II, the diabetes rates was not anything worth noting, if noted at all. After World War II, it's more like 50s and onward, Native Americans started developing diabetes really bad. And, you know, a lot of the authors think or speculate that this is because a lot of these groups, these tribal peoples, lost their traditional ways of subsistence, of feeding themselves, like hunting, fishing, whatever crops, you know, are in that region, and adopted, I guess, what we could call the American diet. So that's the background on that. Why is diabetes there? So I come up with this question. Are culturally informed interventions clinically more successful at preventing and management of type 2 diabetes amongst Native American and Alaskan Native populations? And that's really, some of the literature talks about using conventional methods, but really I want to focus on success rates of the culturally based ones. Based on preliminary examination of the available literature, it's hypothesized that the culturally based informed interventions will do better or do good at the management and prevention of type 2 diabetes. That's what I think, and I'll get to the other component of the methods. The objective is to perform a systematic review to find the available literature that can support that hypothesis, whether it's, you know, basically true or not that these culturally based initiatives are working. Okay, so I know a big thing that a lot of you guys wanted to know about was what was Prisma. I can't ever remember it, so I just say Prisma. It's a long, convoluted thing. Anyway, basically, it's like when you guys go and start doing a search somewhere in a database for papers, right? You might turn up like 500,000 results, and you're like, darn, too many. So you add an extra word here or there, you figure out your search terms to get exactly what you want to do. Prisma's like that, except it's a lot more detailed and you're recording every single step in your search process. For instance, I managed to whittle it down to 38 articles by being extremely precise. And even then, I only come out with like 4 articles that were relevant. So you see where, and that Prisma helps you document it and tells you basically a standardized way to present this information in your paper so that other researchers can reproduce, you know, relatively, if they're doing it at the same time you are, to get the same results. To keep you, you know, above board, but it's also to help you work through your steps. It's a good tool. Okay, a component, an important component of all this papers that I'm looking through, it has to be Native American and Alaskan natives that are federally recognized, because all of the data that a lot of these authors are getting, it's all from IHS, Indian Health Services, and a few papers do mention it, but it should be in all papers that says, if it's through IHS, you have to be part of a federally recognized tribe. There's one piece of literature that says, what about the children, mixed children, or people that may be 1/8? You know, there are concerns about these kind of things. So that's a whole in the research right there. But it's not one that anyone can easily answer. So that's something to be aware of. When I say Native American and American Indian, in this specific context, I'm talking about people that are members of federally recognized tribes, because that's the only good, solid way people can get data. Okay, so my IV is going to be my intervention, and my DV's BMI. Confound could be SES, or it could be allostatic load. I don't know if I mentioned what that is. I've said it to a few people. Basically, allostatic load is if you are, say you're a poor, impoverished person working a minimum wage job with 5 kids, you're stressed out all the time, you're not eating healthy. Well, prolonged mental stress will actually change the hormones in your body and start causing your body to hurt itself, for lack of a better term. So your stress will actually make you physically sick. So that could be another concept. There's chi-square, I wrote that down, but I think I might have to stick a layer of ANOVA in there. When the time comes to do the analysis, I'll have to sit down with advisement from Dr. Greer and figure out if it's appropriate. Data set and times varies on how this data is collected, because we talked about this being a systematic review. That means I'm pulling papers from left and right on the exact same type of topic and research. Those are not all done at the same time. There's people doing different types of research, because some are doing this by telephone questionnaires. Some are doing it by clinical visits where they'll actually do weigh the person and check their height to get what I want, which is the BMI, as to where telephone is just going to be self-reported. And then you have some that are making home visits. Some of these programs are school-related. Some of these are for the adults. That's one thing I wanted to talk about, is these interventions themselves. Some of them could be talking circles. They could be following the circle. And you know, like some of these interventions are just the regular ones, you know? So it's interesting because, you know, you have to read through this stuff and figure it out. But I'll tell you right now, I'm going to use BMI as my indicator, because that for sure, from what I've seen in the literature, is just about in every single paper. And all these papers are measuring different stuff, right? Or they're saying their success rate. They're measuring their success rate by different metrics. But just about all of them I've seen have BMI. So that's kind of what I want to look at. So by using a systematic review as a method of investigation, I will get more precise estimation of the clinical success in culturally informed type 2 diabetes. Okay, what does that mean? I forgot to toss this in there. Clinical, okay, we talk about headache pill X and headache pill Y. Which one's statistically better? We had this conversation before. It could be statistically by a little bit, but in the real world, it doesn't matter because it could be like by 30 seconds faster, right? That's the difference in clinical success. We're talking about, is it actually working in the real world? Because if we just go off the stats, you could throw away a valuable piece of information that could actually be beneficial. So we want to look at clinical success as opposed to just looking at statistical success. Hold on. This is my reference list, and it's going to grow more, but